super fun, and all about artisan cheese and more to melt your peaceful heart and toast your peaceful life. Coming to you from the Appalachian Mountains of southwestern Virginia, this is the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hey, this is Scott Hall from Peaceful Heart Farm, and you are listening to the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hello, everybody. Melanie Hall here. Hope you are doing very, very well. The conversation today and every day revolves around the value of tradition, traditional food prep and storage, traditional cooking, the new traditional farming practices, and of course, traditional artisan cheese. Topics discussed here are designed to create new perspectives and possibilities for how you might add the taste of tradition into your life. In today's show, we're going to talk about how cheese makes you happy. First, we're going to do some Homestead life updates. Then I'll get into the cheese and nutrition, nutritional content, facts about fat, lactose intolerance, and so on. Why cheese makes people happy especially. And we'll finish up with a cheese fondue recipe. How about that? All right, let's talk about some Homestead life updates. Scott's working hard on getting the creamery built. Every day that does not bring adverse weather sees him out there building the walls. And there are also lots of other odds and ends and details he adds in that kind of break up the monotony. He's always telling me he did this thing and that thing, and I don't really know what he's talking about, but I listen. I know he's out there working really, really hard. It's a very detailed operation that he's doing out there, and he always excels in whatever he does. He always excels at it, and I really appreciate that about him. I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful life here with him. Our life has purpose and meaning as we both work hard to bring you the benefits of traditional handmade artisan cheese. And the winter drags on. Seems like a long one this year, doesn't it? You know, every year winter is the same 13 weeks on the calendar. But you always have varying weather conditions during that period of time. And so it alters our perception of time, I think. And then there's a common winter ailment called seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. Seasonal affective disorder. I'm sure some of you know of what I speak. It's a type of depression that's related to changes in the seasons. Symptoms can begin as early as the fall, and they can continue into the winter months. Occasionally, SAD causes depression into even spring and early summer, but that's a little bit rarer. Spring usually brings a rush of relief. I've experienced SAD every year, not early in the season, but usually this time of year and forward, it just progressively gets worse and worse and worse. This year is a little bit different. I've significantly changed my diet, and it shows. And while I can still feel the effects of the winter season, it's muted compared to previous years. That's the best way I can describe it. I still feel kind of heavy sometimes and slightly weighted down by life in general, but it's almost like a passing thought. So I'm like aware of the thoughts, but they don't actually bear down on me like in the past they might have. And as an aside, I generally just suffer through it. But if you're experiencing that, there are things you can do. There's light therapy or phototherapy, and that's kind of the most common treatment. Some schools of thought attribute the issue to reduced vitamin D from the reduction of sunlight. There's less light due to the shortness of the days. More severe cases sometimes even require medication or psychotherapy. You know, symptoms, they start as they're like minor issues. You're having trouble sleeping. You have a general loss of interest in doing anything. Low energy, sometimes maybe feeling sluggish, or maybe you're just like really agitated for no reason and just irritable. And then as the season progresses, the symptoms just kind of get worse and worse and worse. In the past, there have been times when it was really overwhelming to me, especially when I was working for someone else. And there was a high stress involved. And the more stress there was, the more overwhelming the seasonal affective disorder seemed to be. But always then it's like poof, spring arrives and it all evaporates like mist, and joy comes bubbling up again. It's pretty amazing. Well, let's talk about how cheese might help with that. Did you know that cheese has nutritional properties that stimulate your happy hormones? All right, let me first just cover the basic nutrition in cheese, and then I'll get to the happy hormones. So nutrition. Cheese is a delicious, tremendously efficient source of nutrition. It supplies many valuable nutrients, including proteins, sugars, vitamins, minerals, and trace elements. A 4-ounce piece of solid farmhouse cheese, for example, it supplies more than half the adult nutritional requirements for protein, fat, calcium, and phosphorus, as well as significant portions of vitamins A, B2, and B12. Those are important. If you compare the nutritional content of a 3.5 ounce chunk of a hard aged cheese such as cheddar or Emmental, and compare that to an equivalent amount of chicken eggs, 2 eggs would be about 3.5 ounces. The cheese contains twice as much protein and a quarter the cholesterol. I'm still going to eat my eggs too, but the cheese packs a much larger nutritional punch without the extra cholesterol. So the miracle of evolution has really ensured that milk is an extremely nutritious food. Without it, how would mothers down through the eons have guaranteed the survival of their babies? Cheese concentrates the nutrients in the milk. It's a highly efficient method of getting vital nutrients for our body. Another advantage of cheese is that its nutrients are pre-digested by bacteria and enzymes during cheese making and aging. And that means the process of breaking down the proteins, the fats, and the sugars, it began before it was savored on our palate and began the journey to our tummy. Even more, plants in the pasture have absorbed the nutrients from the soil. The dairy animals have extracted those nutrients, packaging them in the form of milk. And that's another place. There's a lot of gathering of the nutrients together. It's already been done for you. The grass-fed cows, I'll talk a little bit more about that, how important that is. So your body has to devote less effort to processing cheese than it does with many other comparably nutritious foods. Now, cheese just tastes good. It tastes good and it satisfies us. And a big reason for that is the fat. There are beneficial fats available in milk, and many of them work as antioxidants and also provide fat-soluble vitamins good for our skin and other organs. In cheese, milk fats undergo lipolysis, which breaks them down into more easily absorbed and beneficial fatty acids, some of which in turn enables us to metabolize the fats from other foods. So there's a bit of a chain reaction going on there. Now I want to bring in just I want to get into more about the fat content, but let me talk about CLA. Before I completely change topics, I want to talk about this other nutrient. Cheeses, especially those made from the milk of grass-fed animals, are a good source of conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA. It's a highly beneficial nutrient. If you want to look it up, conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA. In small studies involving animals, CLA has been shown to prevent heart disease and several types of cancer. It also appears to enhance the immune system. Also, CLA is considered a fat-reducing fat. Now, you heard that right. There are studies on this. And let me give you some info on one study. I'll put a link in the show notes. There are other studies, but this one in particular had some interesting points that I want to make. Jean-Michel Goyer, PhD with the Scandinavian Clinical Research Group, did the study. It was a relatively small number of participants. There were 180 men and women, and they were followed for a year. A third of the participants got a typical off-the-shelf pill of 80% CLA. Another third got a 76% CLA in a syrup formula disguised in a capsule, and the last third took a placebo capsule of olive oil. So they're all getting these capsules. 2 of them have CLA, 1 of them is just olive oil. Nobody had to change their diet or their exercise. Interesting, though, all reduced their calorie intake a little bit during the study. People kind of speculated that was due to the tracking of their food with a diary. I mean, that can really wake you up to what you're actually consuming. As far as exercise, they all got about the same amount. So just a brief summary of what was found. Both the CLA groups lost weight, about 4 pounds. The placebo group stayed the same, no weight loss. The CLA syrup group had a 9% body fat loss, and the CLA pill group had a 7% body fat loss. The placebo group had no body fat loss. Both of the CLA groups had similar improvements in muscle mass, no change in the placebo group. So that's good news, eh? Losing weight was good, but I found the conversion of fat to muscle to be the most interesting to me. CLA is found naturally in beef, lamb, goat, and dairy products. All right, so that CLA is probably one of the most studied aspects of with grass-fed animals and with the cheese. All right, let me talk about fat. I did talk about the reason that cheese tastes good is the fats, the beneficial fats, or just the fact that it has fat. Because cheese contains fat naturally, it raises some concerns, and there are some valid concerns there, but for me, not for the fat, but for the calories. A little bit of cheese goes a long way. Real cheese delivers a lot of nutritional bang for your buck and a lot of caloric bang for your buck. And the fat is the culprit there. The key is to eat moderate amounts along with your other dietary choices. And so let's talk about the fat content of various cheeses. Contrary to appearances, a hard, grainy cheese such as Parmesan might actually contain more fat than a creamy, luxurious one such as any triple cream cheese. Rich triple cream types are labeled as 75% butterfat, while the Parmigiano Reggiano claims only to be around 35% butterfat. Right? So you think that Parmesan is going to be lower in fat. But the trick is that the cheeses are labeled by percentage of fat in their solid materials, not in their total weight. So cheeses retain water even after much of it is extracted during cheese making, and the less water a cheese retains, the harder or denser it will be. So you get this dense Parmesan cheese, and let's say you've got a dense cheese with 50% butterfat. It could actually deliver more fat per serving than a soft, gooey one with 70% butterfat, because it's concentrated. Now, let me briefly mention here lactose intolerance. Let's talk about lactose intolerance. Well-made aged cheeses actually are one of the few dairy products that will not cause problems for many people with this difficulty. And the first and most important step of cheese making alongside protein coagulation is the conversion of lactose into lactic acid. It's the souring or fermentation action of lactic acid bacteria on the milk. And the small amount of lactose that's left over after active cheese making ends is further broken down by glycolysis during aging. So what this means is that for people who have trouble digesting lactose, it's not a problem with aged cheese because the digestion has already been done for them. There's no digesting of lactose. It's not there. It's already been done for them by the cheese making and aging process. It's digested. Give it a try. You too can be a happy cheese eater. Now, speaking of cheese making you happy, why is that? All right. I ran into a wonderful piece of information wherein a neurologist, talks about how cheese literally makes you happy. Dr. Thomas C. Morell, he's a neurologist, and there'll be a link to the article in the show notes. The title of the piece is Nutritional Neuroscience. And the central core of the article is using nutrition to help heal TBI, or traumatic brain injury. It's called TBI. So he's a neurologist, and he's working with this, and he's working with nutrition to help in that process. There's some really good information about how the brain functions, along with how and why nutrition is important to maximize brain function. And later in the article, he gets specifically to cheese as, quote, the first food that will help your brain. He cites cheese as an extraordinarily rich source of proteins and amino acid, and one of those amino acids is tyrosine. So Dr. Morell's comments on the relation of tyrosine to neurotransmitters in the brain are noted in the article. Let me give a couple of quotes from the article. Again, reference to the whole article is in the show notes. All right, this quote is regarding tyrosine. The body does not produce tyrosine, so it must be obtained from outside sources, of which cheese contains very high concentrations. We quickly began to realize that cheese is one of nature's perfect foods for the body and for brain functioning. Furthermore, the pleasure of eating cheese in its multitude of varieties is not just for the sensuous pleasure of taste and smell, but actually has nutritional importance that will help the neurotransmitters in your brain. Cheese not only supplies calories for metabolism, as well as being an excellent source of calcium, but contains proteins and amino acids that are intricately associated with manufacturing many important brain chemicals. All right, then later on he talks about how cheese makes people happy. Cheese can make people happy. Why? It starts with tyrosine, which is a building block for many of the neurotransmitter chemicals in the brain. It can improve mood and well-being, particularly during times of stress. Tyrosine is a substrate of many well-known neurotransmitters, including adrenaline, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Cheese may be one of the basic primordial foods that improves the performance of our brain, with deep connections from the olfactory bulb to the parts of our brain responsible for memory and emotions. Cheese may just be the perfect food to capture the nutritional emotional duality that our bodies and brains need. I find it so refreshing that our medical profession is starting to look at food as nutrition for building, maintaining, and healing the body. How food contributed to our evolution. We didn't just pop in here. The strong survived and the healthy survived. What were the healthy things that people ate? Let's see. Now he's going to talk about casein. Cheese contains high levels of casein, which is the primary protein found in milk. As casein is broken down and digested, it is converted to tyrosine. Casein is also broken down into the chemical casomorphine, an opioid molecule in the same family as morphine. And this may explain some of cheese's addicting qualities. Now, I can relate to the addicting quality of cheese. As my diet has improved, my urge for eating too much food is strongly diminished. However, once I start eating cheese, I may overeat if I don't pay attention. So I measure. All right, so let's talk about these neurotransmitters here. He's going to talk about these neurotransmitters. There are many receptors for the tyrosine molecule in the olfactory bulb, where our sense of smell courses through our central nervous system. The tyrosine in cheese is broken down into several chemicals. One of them is epinephrine, that's adrenaline, which has many positive physical and mental effects to make us more alert. Epinephrine also increases the flow of oxygen and glucose to the brain and muscles, which elicits the fight or flight response to stressful or dangerous situations. Norepinephrine helps fight off depression and can improve our attention and concentration skills. Dopamine is a powerful neurotransmitter involved in mood stability and accounts for pleasurable feelings and activation of the brain's reward systems. Tyrosine is also a precursor to levodopa, which is used to replace deficiency of dopamine in Parkinson's disease. Finally, tyrosine is also a precursor to melatonin, the skin pigment that protects us from ultraviolet sunlight damage, but is also associated with insulin production, which regulates blood sugar levels. Wow. I mean, how perfect is cheese? It makes you feel good with all of that neurotransmitter action. It makes you alert and fights depression. And then, working with diseases such as Parkinson's disease. It's amazing. All of these are just critical for brain performance and memory retention. Now, so I'm just really excited about this information about why cheese makes you happy. And it's all about this tyrosine. As a final note on that topic, have you ever wondered what those little crunchy pockets that develop in the paste of well-made aged cheeses are? Those are crystals of tyrosine embedded in the long chains of amino acids of the casein molecules. When they make your mouth water, they're not only providing cheese-eating pleasure, but they're also setting into motion a series of very real and tangible benefits to your body and brain. Let's move on to today's cheese fondue recipe. Now, cheese fondue, do you think, oh, that's such a fancy thing? And yeah, you go to fancy restaurants, you get it. But it can also be a very quaint and close tradition in any family or group of friends. Whenever you have any kind of communal eating, it can bring people together. And as an added bonus, it's really easy to make. The only skill needed is the ability to stand at that stove and stir. So cheese fondue, it's a Swiss invention, and it became popular in the U.S. in the 1960s. So I'm looking to revive a little bit of that tradition. At its core, fondue is melted cheese served in a pot over a portable heating device. And it's enjoyed communally. As I said, it can be made with or without the official fondue set. A double boiler setup will work just fine to keep it warm. You can also use a crock pot as an option. The key is low, slow heat. Add some wooden skewers and your homemade fondue set is complete. Now, how do you make that perfect fondue at home? The perfect cheese fondue is rich and smooth. And so first I want to go over a few tips to make it easy to make that happen for you. You want it rich and smooth. Stick to these tips. Your family and your guests will be transported to the Alps with their very first bite. All right? You can do it. First, use good quality cheese. It will be more expensive, but worth it. Even if you ignore all of the other tips, keep this one. Fondue truly is about the cheese. And the quality and types of cheeses you use will have an enormous impact on the final product. For a classic Swiss cheese fondue, meaning like one you'd find in Switzerland, a mix of traditional firm alpine mountain-style cheeses is best. Gruyere, Emmental come to mind. We make a cheese called Pinnacle, and that'll serve you there as well. There are a lot of other cheeses that will also work. No need to be bound by the Swiss label. So you want a buttery, creamy cheese that melts smoothly. Cheddar cheese will work. Even though the flavor would be less traditional, it would still taste fantastic. I've used our Claude Deville cheddar mixed with Alpine-style Pinnacle, and the blend warms the heart. Next tip, grate. Do not chop the cheese. Grated cheese will melt much quicker. Then you want to toss the cheese with the cornstarch thoroughly. Cornstarch helps thicken the fondue, and it prevents the cheese from clumping. You don't want lumpy cheese. The classic cheese fondue does call for white wine. Use a good one. Choose something dry and high acid, such as a Sauvignon Blanc. The taste of the wine directly impacts the taste of the fondue. The acid in the wine helps keep the cheese smooth and gives it an even texture. Again, we don't want lumpy fondue. You can substitute, if you don't want wine, how about that bone broth that I talked to you about making a couple of weeks ago? Or you could even use unsalted chicken or vegetable stock. Now, sometimes beer is also used for cheese fondue. Just swap out the wine with your favorite beer. And beer works really well in a cheddar cheese fondue. Now, next tip. Important. Add the cheese slowly and stir constantly. This is so important to make sure the cheese fondue is buttery smooth. You grab a small handful and sprinkle it into the pot, stirring constantly. Wait for each addition to melt before adding the next. Don't try to rush it. You won't win. Just enjoy the moment at the stove, at peace with yourself, the cheese, and the promise of a luscious fondue. Now, what should you dip? Bread is always delicious. French or sourdough bread cut into 1-inch cubes so that it can be easily skewered. Apples, tart apples like Granny Smith, they're fantastic. Dip with the cheese fondue. You'd cut the apples into cubes. Cherry tomatoes, one of my favorites. Roasted baby potatoes. Steamed broccoli reminds me of broccoli cheese soup. Mushrooms. And what if it's game day? You could do potato chips or tortilla chips, a soft or a hard pretzel, ham, turkey, beef, bacon. That's going to be even better than you think it's going to taste. But make sure the bacon isn't too crisp or it'll break off in the pot. How about shrimp or mussels? Kielbasa or just hot dogs. Pepperoni, meatballs, pickles. I mean, the choices are endless, and they're really kind of up to you. There are no rules there. Anything that tastes good with cheese, it's going to be heaven. All right, it's going to take you about 25 minutes to make this fondue. Now, as I talked about, it's basically you've got your cheese and your wine. All right, that's your two basic ingredients, but there are a few other things, and the cornstarch I mentioned. You're going to be looking for a pound of cheese or 4 cups, and you want 2 or more cheeses of your choice. A Gruyere, Emmental, Appenzeller, and of course our Pinnacle. Those are some choices, but again, 2 or more. So it could be 50-50. You might have 3 of them, and a third of this, a third of this, a third of that. Whatever. Experiment and enjoy. You'll need 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. You're going to need a cup of dry wine. Sauvignon Blanc is good. A clove of garlic minced. Tablespoon of fresh lemon juice. A tablespoon of kirsch is traditional. It's a clear, colorless fruit brandy, so you could substitute any brandy of your choice, or you could even leave that out. You want about a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg ground. Also, another optional thing to add would be a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. And then, of course, you want your assorted fondue dippers that I talked about, whatever you want there. Now, what to do? You're going to grate the cheese, as I said, in a medium bowl, and then combine all of that grated cheese with the cornstarch. And you're tossing it, get it thoroughly coated, all of the pieces coated. And, all right, so then on the stove, you're going to start with the other liquid ingredients. So in a fondue pot, stove-safe fondue pot, or a large heavy saucepan that you're going to then turn into a double boiler when you get ready to serve it. In your pan, put your wine, your garlic, your lemon juice, and bring it to a simmer over the medium-low heat. And then you're adding the cheese to that liquid. All right, so you're heating up the wine, the lemon juice, the garlic, and then you're going to start adding the cheese a little bit at a time, stirring really well between each addition to ensure your smooth fondue. Now, once you've got that smooth fondue, then you're going to add that brandy, the nutmeg, and mustard if you choose. All right, that's it. It is really simple. Arrange an assortment of bite-sized dipping foods on a platter. Carefully pour your fondue into a fondue pot, or set it on your hot double boiler water to keep it warm. And then you're going to serve with the fondue forks or wooden skewers. Just dip and enjoy. So one recipe note that I want to add here. If you're using a crock pot, you don't need to wait for the wine and the lemon to simmer before you start adding the cheese. You just put it all in there, and then you just kind of stir it as needed until the desired consistency is achieved. It just takes a little bit longer in that crock pot. It's going to take quite a bit longer in that crock pot. All right, final thoughts. I've run out of words for today, and I hope you have the winter blues. If you have the winter blues that You take time out of your day to pamper yourself. Maybe have some of that cheese fondue. And remember, this too shall pass. Enjoy some of the cheese to get that tyrosine going and get happy. And again, I hope you'll try the fondue. And you can let me know what creative ideas you used and the traditions you started by commenting on a Facebook post that will be there at Peaceful Heart Farm. As always, I'm here to help you taste the traditional touch. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, may God fill your life with grace and peace.